What's going on, guys, and welcome to the Essential Scares podcast, the show where we watch and play our way through horror to determine what is truly essential. I am your host, Corbin, and with me today is Alan.
Good evening.
Bobby.
What up? It's your boy MC wearing a horror t-shirt to a horror podcast.
That's a really long DJ name.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, did I say DJ because I meant to say MC because I'm a master of ceremonies, baby.
You did say MC. I just misjobbed you.
Well, you know, that's embarrassing for you, and you should be
dare
ashamed.
you bastard.
Check your privilege, pal. Check your fucking privilege, okay?
Oh, man. We have quite a show for you guys today. We are going to be discussing Beyond the Black Rainbow, the debut film by Hollywood royalty Panos Cosmatos. Before we get into it, though, Bobby has a spoiler warning.
Oh, baby, I do. This will serve as your first one and only spoiler warning for the fantastic film Beyond the Black Rainbow. If you don't want
Bobby
this
poisons the well done.
wonderful, beautiful, art-filled horror film ruined for you, please skip to the time code ahead for the essential spoiler-free discussion. Beyond the Black Rainbow needs no explanation. If you don't get it, you must be some kind of dingus. Corbin?
So now normally I would start the discussion, right? But
Yes.
The way that we've decided to do this is for legacy films. Whoever chose the movie is going to kick it off. Bobby, that's you. Luckily,
Yes, it
it's
is.
you this week because I happen to be a dingus. So, Bobby, bring us in.
Dude, Beyond the Black Rainbow is so fucking dope. I love this movie a shit ton. It is a I talked about this, and every person who is quote unquote part of the horror scene, I think that I've talked to personally in my personal life agrees that there are comfort films that they're horror movies that like make you oddly relaxed, right? A lot of people say stuff like Midsommar is a relaxing horror movie for people. I don't get that. What I do get is Beyond the Black Rainbow, because this movie I feel the tension. I feel the panic. I get all of the proper emotions, but by the end of it, I feel the most sincere wave of catharsis. Because at the end of the day, this movie is about freeing yourself from expectation, I think. Evelyn is her name. I'm very, if anybody's listened to this podcast before, you know I'm terrible with names, and I love this movie a lot. Evelyn has all sorts of expectations thrust upon her, right? Whether it is the sadistic, violent sexual fantasies that Barry has, or this, like, you're going to change the world that her father has, or that you're this freak that the nurse has. She has all of these weird expectations thrust upon her, and she does not speak a single outward word, right? She has some psychic powers that she uses sparingly throughout the movie, to interesting and often and sometimes disastrous effects, but she's this kind of this almost completely silent protagonist that throughout the movie is just trying to be free. And by the end of it, you feel that freedom. And there's this intense, for at least me, there's this intense wave of catharsis. I will say, in a video game, allegedly, this was the first time I'd watched this movie free of any sort of completely legal substances in the state of recording. Allegedly in a podcast, in a video game, in a film. But watching this time completely sober, allegedly, it is a very interesting. I think that same. I still felt that same catharsis. I still felt that same tension. This very much this discussing psychosis and psychedelics. It's just very interesting. One of the scrap jokes for this podcast was going to be, for the spoiler warning, was going to be 3 dudes who have never taken psychedelics try to discuss the most trippy movie. And it seems like one of the three of us got it. So I'm gonna open it up.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go right into it. Right. So this is my first time watching it.
Yeah.
And for the sake of full transparency for our audience, I watched it last night. Right. Usually, I give a little bit more head leadway. Right.
But we're banking them.
Just didn't have time to. Yep. So I watched it last night, and I can't help but feel like that will probably end up being a little bit detrimental to my final thoughts. But that's the situation we're in, and so I want to lay that out there, right?
To tack on with you real quick, as bad as that is, I watched this movie 5 hours ago.
Right.
So as awful as Corbin is, I am at least doubly worse.
Which is typical, so everybody expects that, I think.
True, exactly. I'm living up to my very low bar of expectations at this point.
But I think the first point that I would want to make is, Bobby, you mentioned it a couple of times that you felt the tension. You feel the tension in this movie, right? And
Yes.
I think that I'm going to end up taking kind of the opposite angle as you for most of these points. And I actually wrote one of my notes was, I think this is supposed to be an unsettling, tense moment, but it's so confusing that I'm just not.
Which moment was that?
What part?
Several moments. Like, it doesn't really even matter which moment that is in regards to, but I felt like the combination of cinematography and the odd way that it's shot, which at times is beautiful, right? There's a lot of wonderful elements to the film.
Yeah, this movie is beautiful.
But
I don't think that's even in question.
There is this like level of like, the movie is just confusing for me, oddly confusing. And I am not somebody that gets confused by movies frequently. I usually totally know what's going on. I can usually see a couple of the messages right on the front. And I just didn't get this one. And so I was really, really thinking about the movie a lot while watching it. And I felt like I was taking too much effort trying to figure out what was even going on, that the horror never had a chance to like settle in. It was like too deep to be scary.
So I think a similar thing that I would pick up on, what I would relate to with that. So my wife has a theater degree, so I've went to every show that ISU did while we were in college together. And at one point they did some sort of Shakespeare.
You did it.
I have never seen any other Shakespeare, none before that moment. So I did not know that I was walking into English from many centuries ago. I had no idea. So a line was spoken. I then had to think, what the hell did he just say? Understand it. But by the time the next line had come, I was still thinking of the previous line. That's this movie for me. I would watch one scene, and I'm sitting here thinking about what I just saw, but then something else wild is happening, and I'm like, wait, but what's going on with the last scene? But then there's something crazy that happens here, and now I have to go, what's happening here? And it kept piling on. And I think the transitions kind of didn't help me with that either. They're fluid, but also oddly, like, sharp. Does that make sense? Like, the redouts are like,
there's a lot of
weird
like, fade
moments.
to black a lot of times, or fade to some color. It happens a lot. Yeah.
But I think, that part of this feeling that you guys felt of like
Confusion.
Yes, I think that is intentional. I think it is absolutely like
I agree, but it wasn't
good.
It wasn't enjoyable. I guess I didn't like.
I disagree. Yeah. Like I think that there is like there is an article, and I don't know who it is, or else I'd give them proper credit, but the quote is, the title of the article is Beyond the Black Rainbow is the best of whatever the hell it is. And like
This movie is very divisive, for the record. I mean, people seem to either love this movie or
I am
really
incredibly
hate this movie.
I am incredibly in one camp, and I feel like I might be an island on this podcast with that, and that's fine. I'm, as we all know, objectively correct all the time. So
Ben Dunlap, all right,
yeah.
But I think that there's almost an intentionality with because I think there are very clear moments of like of a bad trip or like a nightmare, right, of like this like nightmarish quality to it where like things make sense but they don't. Like one of the bits that kind of catches me really bad is the part where like, how big is this fucking compound? We never really ever get a full sense of what is happening or why. Like she is in this weird underground compound, sneaks out, finds her way to manage to get to the top, and then it's just this kind of normal like arboretum, or how do you call it? Arboretum. Arboretum. Thank you. And then she's just gone. But then what is his name? Not Ben. It's
Barry.
What Barry? Barry. It very clearly had a, in the 60s they were experimenting with the psychedelics to find a way to open, like, I think that's like the very textual argument is like they were experimenting with psychedelics to find a way to open up human consciousness to like find true peace and happiness, like the way to quantify that, right? And either Barry had the worst trip imaginable, being submerged underwater after taking a huge fucking hit of acid, right? Or and like just pure liquid LSD, or Barry really did see the face of God, saw that God was a truly uncaring being that saw through him completely, and elevated Barry to this weird level. But like, there's almost this like, of course he didn't, because Barry dies so inconsequentially, like of a creature so much more powerful than he could ever be. Like there is this like, there's just, it's just so deep, but the story can be so simple, and like you could like there's something about this movie that I think is really cool, because like it can be confusing. I think this movie is really interesting because there are layers that probably I don't get even, and I fully admit that, but I feel like you can take it at the simplest level and still get something from it, but the farther down you go, the more you can connect and find pieces to grab onto. And I like that.
I mean, I think obviously there's
like story-wise.
I mean, right? I think it's impossible to say, right, that this movie doesn't have layers of messaging, right? The movie is like exclusively layers of messaging, right? Like, you mentioned it that, the story is simple, and like, yeah, it is. It's dead simple. They tell 30 seconds of story over the course of 2 hours, right? There's like, yes.
I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't put it that way at all.
There's
okay. Every movie has 30 seconds of story over the course of 2 hours.
This movie,
if you want to go that way,
this movie has so many sequences that are not pushing the story, right?
But like, that's horror. I'm sorry, that's horror.
It just wasn't scary. Like, I think that this movie feels like almost pretentious in its artsiness. It feels like a movie that somebody makes because they think they are very smart, and they want you to feel very smart for having watched it.
So I wrote down that this movie is the kid in the class who references the obscure thing that nobody else would reference, but everyone is like, really, you're going to make that reference? That's what this movie is, or at least it felt like to me. Everybody knows that kid in class. Everybody knows him, and that's to me what this movie kind of felt like.
I don't agree with that. I think that this is a movie that is I like, this movie reminds me of somebody who is like, I mean, like, art, it's an art film, right? Like that's and like, And there's
Sure.
nothing wrong with it being a horror art film, right? Like a lot of very, very, very prominent, some of the best directors of all time, who made some of the best movies of all time, started with and one like there's a very clear reference here to THX 1080, which
1138, George Lucas's movie.
His first movie. Like there's and I should probably know the numbers of that, but I just know THX because why would I need to say anything else? There are these like very clear references to the great art films of huge Hollywood directors in this, and I think that's part of it too. Is it's meant to in an age of I think that there is a play on this 60s and 80s are all the auteurs dead? How do I make a new version of their films, of their true films, right?
I agree with that.
Which is admittedly it can be perceived as pretentious, but I never found it pretentious.
Mm-hmm. It feels like a little bit it's there's a lot of movies, even now, but especially in that period of time. This came out in 2010, I think. Retro was very in. There was a period of time where sort of trying to ape a retro style was in, and I think that we saw
making
this
things on 35 millimeter.
We saw this culminate in a lot of ways in horror. I think when Stranger Things came out and just did it so hard that nobody wanted to do it anymore. Which this movie has a lot in common with Stranger Things, by the way. Just the story of it is almost identical. I don't think we're really to go into that, but
I would be shocked if Stranger Things was not influenced by this movie.
It just feels so obvious, right?
Something I picked up on about halfway through the movie. Have either of you guys played the game Control?
No.
Okay, so Control 100% had some influences from this movie, or kind of a feel to it. Control does a lot with a similar kind of aesthetic, a lot of the whole idea of Control. Just a very brief overview is there's the Bureau of Control. They have random strange artifacts that do all sorts of weird shit. They're basically a branch of government that deals with unknown artifacts that do wild and crazy things. And it feels very similar when you're walking around that area, those areas in that game, to what walking around this compound must be like. Which was, it honestly helped kind of, in a weird way, ground this very ungrounded movie for me. Even if in Control you can run around and fly and push stuff with your mind, it just kind of it helped me at least have a base of understanding to try to then look more and think more as to what I was seeing, even if it's a little out there.
I like the there are really interesting moments, right? That I find when the nurse, after the nurse finds Barry's journal, right? Mm-hmm. Where if anything, it kind of exposes his violent sexual fantasies towards Evelyn, right? Which is super fucked because at best, most generously, she's 17, and he is clearly in his 60s at that point, or 50s or 60s at that point. He is.
Well, the movie is set in 83, right? 83. And she's a baby in 65, 66, right? So I 17, 18,
Yeah. So, but still, fucking weird.
I'm not saying it's not.
Weird.
I'm just
It's weird that the guy that played it's weird that the guy that played Quan Chi wants to fuck this young girl.
Quan Chi, no.
Yeah. But after it's I actually noticed it for the first time that they played up he's taking these pills that are they seem like mood fixers.
Yeah, but they make him happy. It made me think of another video game. It made me think of We Happy Few. Do you remember
Joy?
Yeah,
but I'm pretty sure it's acid thing. Because that scene after he finds the ash of the cigarette butt, he takes a pill, right? and then if you look in the background, it's melting away, and he's like almost finding his way back. Yeah, like that was something that I legitimately had not noticed the first 2 times I had watched this, and like I was like, huh, like there is this like element. I don't know, like there is this element of like what is like there's this there's just so much. This movie is can be so fucking deep, and you guys are lame for not liking it or getting it.
I think that there are some things that would have made me like it more. I mean, I think that like the movie is so non-grounded, right? That it's almost like too detached. Like even with just basic storytelling elements, like the dialogue is all like ASMR style, and you can like barely hear what's going on, or like the infrequency with which it's delivered, or I think that things like that, just the basic storytelling elements. I'll just stop there. The way that the movie chooses to unfold those things, it was almost like it was just too abstract for me. Like I think it was just like one step too far. You know what I mean? I don't know what it was about it. I really wanted to like it. I actually wrote down my third note, which I ended up taking at like the 45-minute mark, because this movie like it's so long, but it doesn't really drag. Like it does have pretty good pacing, even though the scenes are so like, even though the scenes are so long, they don't feel like they're so long. Like there is some very good filmmaking here. But one of my early notes was I already feel like I'm either going to love this movie or I'm just not going to like it at all. And I felt like that, you know, about halfway through, and like unfortunately, you know, it ended, and I'm still not like even 100% where I am. Like maybe I'd like it more if I watch it like 2 or 3 more times. Maybe I'd like it more if I had done drugs in the past. Does that help? I don't know.
Or if you had another 24 hours to sit with it.
I don't know, because the other thing is like there were bits that I just didn't like the part where he is they're doing like the whole backstory about Elena, right? And he comes out of like the black pit.
You didn't like that?
It was.
That's one of the scariest moments in that movie.
The issue that I had with it, I liked some pieces of it, but the issue that I had with it is that like it is just hard to watch. Literally, it was just so, like the color and the cinematography of that scene were just difficult to get through, and it felt like in a way that it was just not enjoyable for me to watch that sequence. And that like totally took me out of it, because it was like, this is just not fun to watch.
So let me challenge that if I can.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like part of the idea of like watching like a horror movie is you're watching unsettling things that are supposed to be hard to watch, especially when you're watching like a gore flick, right? And I feel I personally felt like that was a different take on that, because like I watched it again, I'm like, fuck, this is so fucking uncomfortable. And like that's the emotion it's supposed to evoke, right? In the beginning you're like, this can't be good. Whatever is happening right now cannot be good. I'm not talking about
the sequence of events occurring on the screen.
I know the cinematography of it, but like the way that it's done is like there's almost like he is so like it there's this weird like because it's oversaturated with the white and you can barely see things, and it's almost like he can barely remember what it was like before he went under, and he comes up and like things are clearer even if they're still not in color. And I think that's like there and like there's just like this fucking just, and like where he comes out and he's like covered in the goo, and he fucking kills them. He fucking bites the mom's neck and kills her and things like that. And there's just because he thinks he saw the face of God look past him, look through him. Nothing matters.
Did we
anymore.
know that at that point when that occurred?
No, but it throughout the movie it contextualizes itself. I think they're like what we do know is
like But if you don't know that beforehand and you just murder somebody,
no, I don't.
just
I don't agree with that off the top. I'm going to fight.
I don't
this.
think it even matters what he saw in the pit. Like I think him coming out of the pit and being crazy is enough. Like that doesn't. Yeah. In all honesty, I couldn't care less what he saw in the pit.
I really despise that entire sequence.
Even him sitting in the pit, right? There's this where it's like the colored like skull and the screaming face with the smoke flying out of it. There's almost like this destruction of the soul, like, and I maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like that seemed. Even the first watching, that was fairly obvious. Like he was somebody else before he had this fucking psychotic break to turn him into this monster. Mm-hmm. And like that I find to be very thought provoking of like you can have this break of self and become this something. Like you're like your life changes. And can change in a blink of an eye. Who you are can change in a blink of an eye is a really interesting thought to me. It's scary. It's a very scary thought. Like I think that's why this is one of the scariest moments of like he barely even remembers who he was or who those who were around him was. Like,
I think I'm still having the issue of like I don't know that I ever would have come to that line of reason. Because I was still so confused as to what the hell was going on. Just in seeing all these random skulls with smoke coming out of them. Like this movie was wildly confusing for me. And I do not watch artsy films in any capacity. Let alone a horror artsy film. So for me to dive this deep into it was definitely... It just didn't work for me. In almost any capacity. That sequence specifically, the moment that it shifts to it and everything is white and I can't see a damn thing, at that point I was checked out for that sequence. Like Alan, it didn't matter what occurred after that. I was like, I don't understand.
Alan doesn't like Kubrick, confirmed.
Maybe not.
I don't know.
What?
I've only seen one Kubrick movie ever, so.
You've never seen? You didn't see Clockwork Orange?
No.
Oh, that's also very. I love Kubrick. I love Kubrick a lot. That's really good. He's very good.
Yeah. Well, that's what everybody says, right? And I I'm 1 for 1 on Kubrick, right? I'm not going to just put him down on this episode, But
I mean, The Shining is
that's a step. That's a step too far for me right now.
I just find like, because I don't know, like
and I have seen other people like compare this movie to Kubrick, right? Like I think, and
because everything feels intentional. There's nothing about this movie that feels unintentional.
Yes, I agree with that for sure. But I also think that there is an air of like watchability that is like lost along the way in this one in particular. I don't want to comment on other Kubrick movies, but like The Shining has a ton of layers. Everything, there's documentaries and books and whatever written about The Shining movie, and everything is very purposeful. And
people have no idea whether or not it's even. Everyone's dissecting it, trying to find the meaning behind it. And Stephen King just goes, "It's bullshit. It's all bullshit because it's not what I wrote."
But like, you can still watch The Shining as like a layman and just go like, "Yeah, spooky movie. I loved it." Like there's, and I think that the reason why that movie works and why some movies that have a lot of layers work like that is because there's something that draws you in and that anybody can kind of get into, and then there's like all these like stacked levels on top of it. And I don't think that every movie needs to have that, but I think it impacted my personal enjoyment of it.
I think if anything, I think that if I want to compare this to Kubrick in a like a way, like if you want to look at this as looking at the layers, I feel like the top layer of this movie is too simple. If you want to make that criticism, I won't even necessarily fight that criticism. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't super agree with it, but I think that there are layers deep that you can find it, and I think even with Alan, if I dare challenge my esteemed co-hosts, is that Alan got lost between two layers. I don't know how many layers deep he got, but got lost between two layers and didn't find his way out.
I don't even know how many layers
It's an Alan problem and not the movie's problem.
I'm not going to disagree with you there. This movie made me go, am I too stupid for like high art film? Because maybe that's just how it is for me. But I really did, like, as I was watching this and I finished it, I just went, am I an idiot? Like, what's going on here? I just couldn't put, it was like I had a puzzle and I could see that these pieces technically fit together, but I could not physically put them into any coherent shape that would be the picture the puzzle is trying to show me. And if that's a me problem, that's cool.
See, Alan, it just sounds like you're struggling with your own philosophy, my guy, and maybe you have to keep working on it.
Okay. Is that the layer I got lost in my own philosophy? Somewhat came in there.
Your own philosophy, my dude. You just gotta fucking, like.
I mean, if there's one positive I can ultimately say,
dust, my guy.
I did like the gore. I enjoyed it. It was fun for what it was.
Because it's so understated, but it hits so hard.
The first shot of gore with the nurse's head blowing up, basically,
her eyes blowing out of her face.
Yeah, I literally was writing down, so she's blowing her mind, and then I went, oh no, actually for real was what my note says. So that was that. You kind of knew, like, oh well, something's happening here, but we hadn't seen. I think her name's Alana, right?
Elena, yeah.
Is that her? Elena, yeah. She had some sort of psychic abilities. We already had seen that established. But then for her to just fucking blow somebody's head up was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, I have a question.
And then Barry has the Devil's Teardrop, which is like a fucking dope ass name for a murder weapon.
Yeah.
Come on, the Devil's Teardrop.
Alan, what's your question?
It's pretty metal. What's the pyramid that he was controlling?
It's like controlling her abilities. He's basically it's like a psychic dampener. That's like the surface level explanation. Obviously there's a lot going on in this movie with like geometry, and I'm definitely too stupid to understand what that's all about.
Let me be very
I know
clear.
that there are layers.
That is a layer I am both unable and unwilling to talk about, because there is a lot of stuff with squares and triangles.
Yeah, and there's like a couple of things that are circles, but very specific things. It's like, well, what does this mean? I don't know. I admit that they're like, I think that I probably could get further into this movie than I did manage to, but there's definitely a stopping point way before the end of the movie.
And like, I want to keep unraveling the riddle, but that's so far down on my list of things to unravel.
What's the square mean? Is the square the
same?
What does it mean?
What does it mean? What does it mean? How to get burned? Right? How to get burned?
Yeah, right.
Wicker Manning it.
So when she is escaping, she goes across this like elevator shaft looking thing. So first off, how fucking big is this facility? No, that's what I'm saying. Her escape sequence works. I'm not saying there's not parts that don't work in this movie, Bobby. All right, even simpletons like me can go, escape scene. She's trying to escape. Oh, dangerous. Like, I get that.
Then how don't you get the tension, Alan? Huh? You big fucking dingus.
But when she pops out in a different patient cell... that worked for me in a specific way, because it made me go, okay, so there's more people here. How many more people are here? Like, was kind of where I went there, and I was like, that's interesting, because you've got Barry, who is a psychopath, who is hardly even human at this point. How many other people does he torture? How many other people does he sit and just watch them cry and get aroused sexually?
she's just.
But I
his
mean, we've
favorite,
seen
like,
2, but I feel like just seeing how many layers to this place there are.
It's
just makes me like,
interesting because he says in the beginning, "You're the highlight of my day," which implies that there's other things that he does in the research facility throughout the day.
Yeah.
Are there more people like him? I mean, we know Alana technically is, but I mean, are there more doctors just roaming around that are?
Yeah, he's just
however
he's just the head like doctor.
He's the protege of what was the dude's name?
Dr. Borgia or whatever.
Yeah.
Aboria, whatever it is.
Aboria, yeah.
Yeah. Which that guy's fucking weird too, but
he, that like, I felt like he aged like an odd amount between those 17 years. I thought that there was, I think there's like something there. I think the movie is supposed to make you think that, but he didn't seem like he was like that old in the intro, like old, but not that old.
I think the implication, this might just be me thinking of like true crime, is like he was like a psychosexual cult leader that had like some sort of like scientific technological bend to it, and like made a shit ton of money because he fucking legit ran a cult and then like turned it into an enterprise. Yeah. And those people do not live healthy lives, right? And then Barry just fucking murders him with heroin. Like,
yeah, seriously. I thought that the movie was going in a more like supernatural element, maybe at that point. I thought maybe like, oh, was he keeping himself young and like that age has passed, but I don't think so. I think that I misread that, but that was my thought when I first saw him.
Bobby's going to hate what I'm about to say.
I've hated everything that you guys have had to say so far. So
that's fair.
Everything? I didn't even get to the good parts
these have been a really good conversations. All jokes aside.
The better version of this movie. Oh my god, that hurts you so hard. Nope. I almost wish this was more Lovecraftian
Stranger Things season 1
than it actually is. Because like, I can wrap my head around Lovecraft, the idea of like, it has some of those elements, like once you see what you aren't supposed to see, you can't unsee it in a way. That to me is a lot easier to grasp than like how ethereal this whole movie
Hold on. I'm going to jump in before Bobby
again, this could be a me problem.
How can cosmic horror be more relatable for you than just basic religiosity?
Because I didn't have religiosity at all in the mind when I was watching this.
How?
I think that's probably like the most textual, besides like the obvious like good girl has to escape bad guy. Like the very next layer is like, well, this is clearly very religious, this whole story.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is I'm
God's
also mean
real
like
and he doesn't give a shit is one of the textual arguments of this movie.
I'm more so meaning
says,
like Barry.
Barry, he says like he's here to bring the apocalypse. His knife is called the Devil's Teardrop. Like there's obvious religious elements. Yeah.
The quote that he says specifically to his wife is, "I saw God and he looked past me, through me. But he chose me to bring his message. You're nothing. You're less than nothing. You're spit in the wind." And then he crushes her skull. That is very much like...
And then he kills two guys and then trips on a stump. And that was the end of it.
Because his legs can't move because of her psychic abilities. It's great.
Which, I did have to rewatch that part because when I first watched it, I was like, I thought that she didn't end up doing anything. And I thought it was so clever that he just like got stuck and then tripped and like killed himself on accident. And I was like, oh, that is just hilarious. After all that, he just falls over and bumps his head. And then I rewatched it. The first time I watched it, I also thought she did it. Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. But I was totally fine with it just being an accident.
But either way it works, right? Because you can even interpret that. Yeah, because there is this he has these huge delusions of grandeur only to die either by somebody who is just physiologically in a different level than this person could ever possibly be, right? Or by pure dumb chance, he just fucking kills himself. Either way, that is that pushes that message of like if we want to look at it as God exists but he doesn't care, there is a message there.
Yeah,
and that's why, Alan, it is absolutely a you problem.
Cool. This movie's not for me. I mean, that's the long and the short of everything I've said. This did not work for me.
I'm sorry. I have to fight. This movie is very, very dear to my heart. I have to fight hard for it.
I definitely didn't. I definitely didn't hate the movie. I think Alan really disliked the movie. I think I feel like maybe I just didn't like.
No. Hold on. Yeah. I want to push back on that. I would not say I disliked this movie.
Okay.
I would say I didn't get this movie. I think those are two very different things. Because you can... Okay. I think there's a version of me that maybe understands what's happening in this movie, but that's not this one. That's not this reality.
Very into Alan.
Yeah. But yes, exactly. I will expand on that in the essential bit more, but this movie is just not for me. It's just not. However, this is one of those movies where I kind of took a step back and thought to myself, okay, you don't get it, and that's fine. What more is there to this movie that you're just not seeing? Because this movie, when I was watching it, I knew consciously, fairly early on, like, this isn't for you, but the people that will enjoy this movie, the people that will defend this movie, are going to defend this movie very harshly for reasons that are probably justified that you just won't understand. Like, I had to kind of have that conversation with myself because I knew it wasn't working for me. It wasn't gripping me. I wasn't picking up what it was putting down. Any cliche you want to use. It just didn't click with me. However, I wouldn't say I disliked it. I'm glad that I watched this movie. That much I will say for sure. Because I think it's shown me that this is like a few steps where for Corbin this is maybe one step too far. This is probably two to three steps at this point in my life too far in the like artsy camp, because I just can't. You know, does that explain my thoughts a little bit?
I think that's actually a really, really good way of saying it. It's not that you think this movie is a bad movie. It's just not. It's not what you're looking for in a movie, and that's okay, right? Like I feel like that's what this is. Is like, this is a movie that like I really like because I leave it every time thinking, and that and like I'm sure you guys did the same thing, but like I don't think necessarily that has to be what everybody wants in a movie. You can want a movie where like the thinking comes after the entertainment, and I don't know if this movie necessarily always does that. Like,
I think it only does that for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think this movie is more to make you go, what? Like, fuck, what is like that like weird etherealness, which I really fucking like. Which again, I cannot explain why. I need to watch the Phantasm movies again, because like I think I should like these. I should like those movies. This is a complete sidebar. I couldn't get through the first Phantasm, and I know I need to watch it again because I don't get why I don't like those movies, because it doesn't make sense, because I love this movie.
Lucky for you, they're all on Shudder now.
I know, and I do. Shudder, sponsor us, please.
I'll pimp Shudder every week.
I legitimately really enjoy
Shudder's
Shudder.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not a sponsor, but it could be.
You're right. Alan, you said that you think this was a good movie, but it wasn't for you. Despite that, or maybe because of it, what would you rate this movie?
So before the cast, I said something that got some pushback immediately from both of you guys. I don't know that I think a score matters for this movie in any capacity. Because of that, I'm going to give it a 2.5. Dead in the middle. Average movie. And here's why. Because if I have to give it a score, because this is the podcast, I literally have written down 2.5 question mark. Hold on. 5 question mark. Does score even matter? That's kind of my point here. I sat down, when I finished watching this movie, I was like, well, this just doesn't work for me. The people that love this are going to really love this. I can't give it more than average because, frankly, I don't get it. I don't understand what's happening. I don't want to say this is a bad movie. It's a 2 or it's a 1 because I don't think that's correct. Like, I think objectively speaking, that's not correct. but I think I can pretty easily say if I have to score it, even though I really don't think score matters for this. I think this is a movie that it feels weird. This kind of just, it just doesn't feel right. The idea of like, out of 5 points, this is an X. Like, it just doesn't, I don't think that's the part of this movie that's important. Whereas I think with other movies we talk about, it's very easy to go, oh yeah, it's a 4 out of 5. Oh yeah, it's a 5 out of 5. And I think that score has a bit more merit. Here, I think the merit of this film, you just have to watch it. Spoiler.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm okay. I wasn't sure if you were going to keep going or not. I was one of the ones, I pushed back on Alan when he said before we started that he doesn't think the score matters. And I push back on that hard because I think that if you're going to give a score to movie A, I think that movie B should all be just as eligible for scoring. Like, do I think that this movie is more artsy? Sure. Do I think that it has taken certain liberties or sacrifices with its storytelling to do something else? Yes. And I think that that should be reflected in the score, right? And something that, a little bit of background, I guess, for our listeners, right? Yeah, we score between 0 and 5. We try to bring an element of objectivity to the scoring, right? Where we score movies maybe based on how good we think they actually are, almost regardless of personal enjoyment at times. And I think that is where Alan is struggling with this one, because he maybe liked it, maybe didn't like it, didn't really get it, but thinks it's good. And I think that you should always think about, if you want to look at it from that angle, like, okay, well, then how good do you think it is? How good do you think it could be? Like, if you wrote, is this a 5? Like, I think that there's probably more of that than a 2.5. And spoilers, I'm not going to give it a 5, right? But
neither am I.
But I think that if you were to say 5 out of 5, like, I think you can fight that, because I think that this movie does have enough going for it that you could say 5. I also think that just from a basic movie watching element, this movie has enough not in it that you could give it like a 2 and then fight for it and probably be right. And if the wide swath of other critics who have reviewed this movie are anything to go by, both of those scores are widely given, right? This movie has like literally 50% on everywhere. Like, half people like it, half people don't like it.
Rotten Tomatoes has a 61. So how about you calm the fuck down there, pal?
Yeah, but Rotten Tomatoes is not an actual aggregate, right? The Metascore is 49.
No.
All of that said, right? There's a lot of things about this movie that I really liked. And there's a lot of things about this movie that I didn't like. And I mentioned all the things that I didn't like. And the biggest thing that I did really like, that we didn't talk about at all, is the score. The music is so good. Will I watch this movie again? I don't know. But I'll definitely listen to the music again 100%, because it's just incredible. It matches the vibe 100%. The music and the cinematography, the visual style. This movie, to me, is style first in so many ways that it kind of like just skips normal movie making and goes, okay, what's the style? This is awesome. All right, 3 layers down now, we've got all this really complex messaging. Here it is. And that's like the movie, and it's just very awkward to watch at times, but I think it's very successful at other times.
Can I just jump in on, because we didn't really get a chance during to talk about this. The thing is,
the music,
I want to talk about the sound. The music really quickly, because the music is one of those rare moments in cinema where you notice the music, and it does very nothing, but it does nothing but add to the feeling that you get, and that is rare experience, especially using like mostly just synthesizers. Definitely, it's sick. It's so sick.
And there's
go back to
there's moments of where like the soundtrack is not quite in key, like things are played like very awkwardly, and like it really does help everything. All of the music is very, very intentional, and considering the way that music is moved and used in most blockbuster movies nowadays, this was really, really nice. I really, really appreciated that. All of that said, I'm going to give this movie a 3.5 out of 5. I definitely think it's better than average. I think it's a good movie. I don't know how much I liked it, but I would recommend it probably to almost anybody because it's one of those that I think you probably should just watch for yourself.
Well, I want to say this starting off with my final review.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there is a world where somebody smarter, wiser, and more self-actualized than myself can give this movie a 5. This is the most pretentious review I'm ever going to give. I don't think I am good enough, smart enough, or ready enough to do that just yet. Because there are parts of this movie that I love a lot that I just don't fucking get. Mm-hmm. And I love this movie. If you've listened to the spoiler cast this far, you know I have been a staunch defender of this movie. But there are bits of it that I just don't get. I don't understand. I don't pretend to understand right now. And so, while I think this movie is beautiful and artistic and cathartic and tense and scary, but at the end of the day leaves you feeling just, for me personally, calm and warm and like you just went through a journey and you got out on the other side okay. This movie is a 4 out of 5 for me. There are bits of this movie that I don't understand, and I can't give it a 5 out of 5 because it feels deeper than my comprehension. I believe it's there. I believe there are answers to the questions that I had, and if I watch the movie, I'll find it, right? And I think Panos Cosmatos is very much in there, and I think, for what it's worth, his second outing does a lot easier job of giving you some of the more complex answers more towards the front, making it a much more accessible movie. And this movie, every fucking person who's listening to this podcast should watch it. I think we probably are all in agreement on that, is like, you should watch this movie. We'll talk about whether or not we think it's essential or not, but like, you should watch this movie. It is not the most accessible movie, and I think that the 3 different versions, even like that we have of this review, kind of shows how this movie can even be, even to a certain extent, seen as a Rorschach test. There's a lot up to, as any sort of like modern art piece is, up to individual interpretation. It's meant to evoke a certain emotion, but you kind of place your own patterns onto it. 4 out of 5.
Nice.
That, again, the literal most pretentious review I will ever give to this, but I love this. I love this movie. Like, it holds my entire heart. Like,
so
is this movie essential?
Is it essential? Alan, you've given, I think, the most hints towards whether or not you think it's essential, so I would like you to go first. No spoilers.
I think
remember.
yes.
You think yes?
Yes, I think this
okay.
is, yes, I do think this is essential. I think this movie, for as much that I did not get, which is a lot, for as much as I couldn't quantify what I liked or disliked, I think this is a movie that is in its own kind of league. I don't really know of any other film, horror-wise at least, that even comes close to what this is. And I think that kind of earns its own merit in a way. I think
I got him before Kubrick. This movie's...
you'd have to go back like 50 years to find more movies like this.
It's such a different experience. This movie is more of an experience than it is a movie. Like,
sure,
it's,
for sure. Yeah, I feel that.
It doesn't feel like your standard movie. Like even a pretentious movie. Like, this is a weird one to bring up, but another kind of artsy movie, Horse Girl on Netflix. That movie, I know it's a random pull, trust me. Very artsy movie.
Dude, I'm shaking my head because I've never seen it.
I'm married to a horse girl, and I've never even heard of this movie.
Okay, first off, you and Jill should watch that movie, but that's neither here nor there. But my point there is that's an incredibly artsy movie, but it's not an experience, okay? So it's this movie definitely will put you in a headspace after it where you're just like, you end up, most of my notes end with question marks. And again, that could just be because of my dumb idiot brain doesn't understand what's happening. But I also think in general, this movie does want you...
You're a big smart pants, and I love you.
That's right.
Okay. I think this movie naturally is going to cause you to ask questions, and I think that is also a good sign at the end of the day if a movie should be essential. I think if you're sitting there going, what was this? What was that? What was happening here? Why did that occur like that? What did that actually mean? I think that's your brain's telling itself that you think it should be seen. I think when you're asking repeated questions over and over and over and over again. So yes, I think this is essential.
Take. Okay. Bobby.
Okay.
Because I know you have something that you want to say in response to Alan, so go for it. And
so I want to start, okay. So first response, and I think Alan's correct in this idea of the questioning thing, because I think there's a difference between like being stuck on like the plot hole bit, because Alan is the most stuck on plot holes, but I think when the questions are deeper than like, okay, so what the fuck was even that? Right? And more like, wait, like your eyes get wide, like what? Like I think are two different modes of question asking. Level. Yeah. And this movie is very much that second one, like
absolutely.
What the fuck? Like
there's definitely no plot holes. Like this movie makes its own sense front to back.
But going to...
none of my alarms went off once in this movie. I mean, I was able to just turn the dissonance. I honestly think because I knew, like, if you read the description and then, honestly, after the intro bit, you can kind of go, okay, this is an artsy film. Let's just turn down all the knobs and be in for the ride. So that kind of worked for me in that way. I was able to just turn that shit off and go, all right, I'm strapped in. Let's see what I'm going to be
I'm ready to see what this is all about.
Exactly.
In a world where, you know what? I thought about this as we were all like, as you were like prefacing it, like, what is my thoughts on whether or not this movie is essential? And I was really ready to gung ho go into it with this thought, right? Of in a world where I become any sort of authority on horror, and then I realized I am the host of a podcast. I have to start treating myself as an authority on horror. So, fuck yeah, it is. I love this movie. This movie is dope as hell, and you should go see it. I was going to say no because, like, I'm no authority. Meh. And I was going to be my typical non-confident self who, you know, and the reality is, if you don't trust my opinion, don't fucking watch this movie. But it's absolutely essential because it is a movie that will stick with you. It'll have you thinking. I think this movie has influence in a big way, whether or not it is the movie that has popularized it. No, it isn't. It's this and Lake Mungo. The fact that we did this back to back, these
that
two
end up
movies
being very odd that we did those back to back. Yeah.
These two movies have similar but very different cult statuses. And while Lake Mungo is absolutely a more popular cult movie, this movie is absolutely. Listen. If people want to start Rocky Horror Picture Show in this movie, I'm fucking down. I don't know how you can make shit funny. You probably can't.
I would be very interested to watch this movie in a theater with other people with theater quality sound.
Almost nobody did. This movie did not get a theatrical release. No. So
really,
it did a very small like indie circuit, and then it went straight to Blu-ray.
I will also recommend, and we will watch this for the podcast. I promise we will do this because I will put it. Yeah. I recommend if this movie feels a little bit too far for you, but like you kind of are like, I get this and I get the gist of this to a certain extent. Fucking watch Mandy, dude. It's so good. And it's got some actual like main stage actors. It's got Nick Cage. It's got that dude from Criminal Minds. It's very good. Or either Criminal Minds or Law and Order. I can't remember exactly what he's from, but
I'm not going to fight you on it.
It's very good. It's very, very cool. And it's a lot more, it has that same like style, but it's a lot less heady, and in a way that I think makes it a lot more accessible. But Beyond the Black Rainbow is, I think, my favorite. It might be my favorite horror movie. I think Evil Dead 2 goes beyond horror for me because it is so important to me. But like Beyond the Black Rainbow has a like it's absolutely my top 5. Absolutely my top 5. Not even a question. And it beats out like most it beats out I think every major like slasher flick for me personally. It's in the top 3, yeah. So
okay.
It's incredibly essential for me, and I'm an authority because we have people listening to this. So
that's right.
Fuck you.
There are dozens.
Yeah. So this one, so it's two yeses so far, right? Which means no matter what I say, the official stance of the podcast is yes. Now, I really wrestled with this one, right? I wrote down my score and my essentiality last night after watching the movie, right? And full transparency, my score changed since I wrote that down, right? I thought about it more. I talked through it. I changed it. And
up or down?
Up. It went up.
Hell
okay.
Yeah.
It went up.
It's gonna keep going up, baby.
It went up by a surprising amount.
What was it originally? What
2.
was your score originally?
I gave it a 2. That was my gut check. I was like, don't like this at all. 2 out of 5. Changed my mind after sitting with it. Maybe if I recorded this episode a week or 2 from now, it would have been a 4 like Bobby, but we didn't, and so here we are. And I initially wrote down not essential. I just didn't really like it at all, right? And I think that there is an angle where I think that you can say yes for the reasons that both Alan and Bobby have said yes, right? But I'm going to add a different side of it, which is that I think that this movie is probably a yes because there are a lot of, even though this movie was not like financially successful or a theater movie or whatever, it ended up influencing a lot of things that came after it. This movie is surprisingly old. At this point, 11 years. And if you look at the way that retro, like 80s horror has went since then, there's a lot of this movie in it. And there's a lot of those properties have things that were in this movie that weren't in things before this movie, right? Like, I think that this movie influenced a lot. And whether or not people bring it up as an influence is a different fact, because this is kind of a niche movie where maybe people aren't going like, oh yeah, Beyond the Black Rainbow was such a huge influence for us. But I think that it was. And I think that if you want to really dive in and go as far as possible into the, how far did we go in the 2010s with the 70s, 80s horror nostalgia, right? How far did we go? Like, I think this movie has to be on that list. And I think that that's a big part of what makes it essential. And I think that long term, Panos Cosmatos, right, comes from a Hollywood family. And I think that he's going to be around for a long time. And I think that this movie is going to be an essential freshman outing for him, that we're going to be looking back 10, 20 years on this movie and going like, okay, well, like, if he follows the trajectory that he is going on from this to Mandy and then whatever he goes next, this movie is going to be something that you really look back on as a very interesting first outing for him. And I think that you're going to need to talk about it more and more. So I think we're going to see this movie come up more often in coming years. Bobby's looking something up, I think.
I wanted to see what he is.
He's got to have He's got to have something coming out relatively soon, right? Mandy's already pretty old.
Oh yeah, actually, yes. He's in He directed 2 episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Presents 10 After Midnight, which I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So
that's not out
he's
yet,
absolutely
though, right? That's coming out soon.
He's 2022.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's absolutely still got shit going for him. And for what it's worth, the 2 things that I've seen him in, that he's directed, like written and directed, they're so fucking cool. They're so like again, this movie is awesome. It's so good, and Mandy is this but accessible.
I definitely think that he's going to be that he will be mentioned as part of like that next wave of like big horror directors.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think so too. And speaking of the next wave of Star Trek content, where can we find you guys? What have you guys been up
to? Alan?
Well, I haven't been up to much. I haven't played much of anything. A little bit of Destiny. That's about it. It's been boring for me listening to Wizard and Glass. That's just kind of what I keep it up to. And you can find me at A Seal Punter, just about anywhere on the internet. Mostly on Twitter, also Instagram, where I post disc golf stuff occasionally. But yeah, it's been a bit of a dry week. I'm going to be on vacation next week, which partially facilitated why we had to record 2 episodes back to back. A little behind the screen look here.
In fact, if you're watching or listening to this the week of release, he's on vacation right now.
Yeah,
I am not in the void, a pile. I'm actually not in a void right now. Finally, for once, I got out. It's crazy.
You're in the soon-to-be ocean.
That's very true. Yes.
Bobby,
what have you been up to?
So here's the thing. We've been talking about it, boys, gals, and NB pals. We're banking them this week. So the reality is, if you're listening to last week's episode, you guys know what I've been up to, which is Destiny, Splatoon, and before I went down here to where I record the podcast, I was watching Big Brother, and the Cookout is a really dope alliance that it seems like they are very committed to the final 6 to make sure that I think for the first time ever a black person wins Big Brother, and that's actually pretty fucking dope for me. It's about goddamn time. It sucks that it took every black person in the house going like, hey, if we just align ourselves together, one of us has to win. And they managed to do it. But it's happening, which is cool. Nice. Big Brother is dope. Yeah. Corbin, how about you?
There you go. Yeah, so you can find me anywhere at Corbingering. Jumping off of Bobby's topic, I've been watching a lot of Bachelor in Paradise.
Oh yeah, the drama continues.
2 episodes a week. That's kind of a lot, guys. But here we are. I'm doing it 4 hours of every week watching
only
Bachelor in
2
Paradise.
episodes a week. Embarrassing, dude. Big Brother's 3 episodes a week.
Are they 2 hours each?
Oh my god.
No, they're only an hour each.
Okay, so that's 1 hour less because I got 2 2-hour episodes. And besides that, I mentioned it. We mentioned it. Now we're really into Warhammer. I have been listening to The Devastation of Baal, however you want to say it. The audiobook narrators are all British because Warhammer is British, so they say Baal or Baal. Sorry, doesn't matter.
Damn lobster backs.
It's about the Blood Angels. It's really cool. So far, I like it. Warhammer is a very action-oriented franchise. It's all war, and the action is like the least interesting part of this book. All the rest of it is really pretty good, and every time they're just scenes of fighting, it's like I actually don't care about this. But yeah, that's me. You can find the podcast anywhere at Essential Scares. We're super active on Twitter and Instagram, and honestly, Facebook too. We don't really mention the Facebook very often, but Alan's out there trying his best on the Facebook page, and we should probably bring it up more often. All of our posts, you can find a link to our Facebook group and Discord. It's in our Linktree. Join one, join both. Let's talk sometime. We would love to do that. But with that, that's the show for the week. Thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening. If you liked the show, please rate, like, subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends. It helps the show. We get a nice little dose of serotonin every time we see a new 5-star review. I would like to feel that more frequently.
It's the only thing that's keeping me going, fam.
Thank you to Alan and Bobby for being on the show this week. This was a really cool episode. I think probably the most like debate that we've had with just the three of us, which is great. Maybe we'll watch some more
controversial
divisive movies in the future. Yeah. I have been your host, Corbin, and this has been Essential Scares.
Play that breakdown. Baby!